in its 4th season, and I already made a video stating why things just felt off. Sure, there's still the outrageous, over-the-top scenarios, like flying predatory sheep that try very hard to remind you that this is the boys, while ignoring very real plot conveniences like Vicky suddenly forgetting that she could pop all the sheep's heads even though she literally just did that with the chicken. I mean, she could do that with multiple people at the same time, but just like Dany in Game of Thrones forgot the Iron Fleet, which resulted in her dragon Rhaegal, who was flying alongside her, dying unnecessarily.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and
Victoria just conveniently forgot that she had powers when it was convenient or simply didn't use them when it would make sense in the story to use them on people she should use them on. Dude, even on Reddit, people are pointing this out, that she kind of forgot she had powers or that she was nerfed. Some people are trying to do better mental gymnastics with the writing by saying that it might take her quite a few moments to concentrate and focus on her power. While one of them quickly said, but they also show that she's bulletproof and immune to acids, so maybe she won't get hurt by sheep. But those sheep ripped up a beat-up bull, so there is that. But then again, who knows? To me, the writing's just all over the place. Or how about the annoying out-of-nowhere writing of Deep killing his longtime octopus girlfriend for no apparent reason, leaving her to die very slowly and horrifically.
She doesn't respect you.
She does respect me!
Wake up, Kevin! She's using you!
You shut the fuck up!
A woman who's... Kevin! Kevin! Stop her! Please, Kevin! Please, Kevin! Kevin, I can't breathe.
Poor Ambrosia. Even though this writing makes no sense, because they previously show on numerous occasions that Ambrosia can survive out of water for a small while, enough to have her liaisons with her boyfriend. It might not be well known to some people that there are a lot of species of octopi that can crawl out of the water and survive on land, some from 20 to 60 minutes. And there are many documented cases of them even jumping out of the water to chase their prey on land to drag it back down in the water. There are countless videos of octopi on ships slowly making their way back into the water through the boat. And since they have in various cases and various scenes shown us that Ambrosius can indeed survive on land long enough for them to have a, coupling session and for Deep to read to her, the scene of her almost immediately dying as soon as she's exposed to air makes absolutely no sense.
Please, Kevin! Kevin, I can't breathe. Please!
Oh my God.
Kevin, please!
I know this was supposed to be funny, but it just came off very cringy to me and weird. And I was just begging for him to go back in there and save her. Like, I don't know. I think all of us fell in love with Ambrosius and Deep not wanting to hurt animals, you know, and then all of a sudden he decides to be violent to the octopus, hearing her die and suffer, and does absolutely nothing about it. He's just completely heartless out of nowhere. It just felt off to me. And don't give me the whole... What are you talking about? They were building up to it for so long. No, they weren't. An argument that they're having, sure, but straight up murder for a guy who can't even stand watching another person eat sea animals? Yeah, okay. It's like they almost wanted us to hate him immediately so we could justify whatever happens to him when he decides to kill for Homelander and go after the supposed good group. This guy went on a whole redeemable arc only to turn at the drop of a hat and go against his very nature, which honestly, to me, made no sense and came out of nowhere. Much like Frenchie suddenly being gay for the guy whose family he assassinated. It felt like sloppy, convenient writing. They better not do that with A-Train because he's becoming another favorite of mine. Then again, I do have a soft spot for speedsters.
Like, I tell you what, you get better and I'll teach you to run as fast as me.
Yeah?
Yeah?
You'll teach me to outrun cancer?
For real though, everyone dogs on speedsters, but this gotta be one of the funnest powers to have, because you literally slow down time when you're moving that fast.
Is to save every day.
That's hot.
But what has to be the worst offender in the show or the season so far is how far the showrunners go to use talking points from people they don't like or right-leaning or moderate commentators. So here's the thing. For me personally, the show used to be very funny, but now it's more shock and awe or a constant dig at anyone who doesn't share their exact views. The showrunner or writers didn't always go this hard, but now it's like over the top. The main issue isn't even the cringiness of it all. It just feels like the show is just bashing half of its audience while making the other half seem flawless and justified in anything they do against people who think differently. The showrunner, Eric Kripke, even comes out and says as much. The show goes to such lengths to achieve this that it ends up becoming the very villain it tries to pose the other side of this universe as. Ordinarily, I wouldn't care because the show has always been this, with the exception of them going in on conservative people 70% and the other side 30% back then. But now the creators seem to have pushed their bias slider to 99% in favor, negative favor, of one faction specifically. And they showcase and make fun of the far-right ultra-radical people, which is fine. But they rarely do that with the ultra-radical left people, if at all, or they just straight up woefully ignore them. It's also strange because there are some takes made by the people they're trying to make fun of in the show in an attempt to make them look villainous that aren't the gotchas that the showrunner thinks they are. In episode 7 of season 4, there's a puppet show going on that Ryan clearly doesn't want to be a part of, and I can't blame him. They're spreading propaganda in the show and honestly giving the radical people ideas by telling them that they should report their parents or people for being gay. It's just the way they frame the entire song. They make it seem as though all the bad people or the bad populace that follows the super beings are bad for agreeing with anything in the song. So basically, anything that Homelander and his followers are telling the kids to do, which is basically what the old evil Nats used to do in Germany, is to report on their neighbors for all the bad things that they were doing. So tell me why, and this has been a running theme throughout the show, do they keep trying to frame it as if kids reporting adults trying to groom them is somehow a villainous take? I know, they get people coming out and white knighting for the show and saying, that's not what it means. We've already established that anything that comes out of Homelander's mouth or what Vought is pushing is somehow evil in nature, but reporting predators is not. So they say a line also that the people should report on who could be a moocher from the welfare state, meaning people who are taking advantage of the welfare system, them, which does happen, which in turn takes away resources from single mothers and other people who really absolutely need it.
I could be a moocher from the welfare state.
So the welfare system is placed there for people who are or have fallen on hard times and are unable to work in the United States. It was the Great Depression that led President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's introduction of the Aid to Families with Dependent Children program and the Social Security program through the Social Security Act, which created a public welfare system to provide assistance to various dependent persons in need. But there's no denying that the system is a little bit broken, because now you have people being encouraged to have more kids because they directly benefit from the welfare system, which will just take care of them. And when something is easy like this, or when something is overly available like this, most people would not be motivated to go out there and gain the skills that they would need to compete with the elites and celebrities in society, or they lie and say that the dad is not in their life. I currently know people who are on the welfare system, and I straight up asked one of them when she was telling me she wanted to be a fashion designer and she wanted to go public with all her stuff, and I told her she could open up a shop and a clothing line, and she said, well, if I do that, then I'll lose my money or the stability that she feels like she has with welfare. Another guy that we know, a friend of ours, me and my husband, said something similar. Not directly, but he heavily implied it based on his actions and the things that he said. And it's kind of sad because both people are extremely talented. If you're making under a certain amount of money, you get EBT food assistance as well, but over it, and you lose that. You're just cut off. However, many people will make a bunch of money on the side under the table or have a boyfriend living with them who's making a bunch of money and says he doesn't live there, so his money doesn't count towards being eligible for welfare. Some of my husband's family and some friends were on it in New York, and he witnessed people taking advantage of the system all the time. It's similar to a divorced woman not remarrying because if she does, she will lose the alimony from her first husband. People are just human. When the system's flawed, they'll find ways to work around it. Not everyone does it, but if there's a loophole, many will take advantage. It's what makes humans so amazing because of how resourceful they are. And honestly, you can't really fault them when the system's not foolproof or airtight. That being said, I don't think people should go and start reporting and snitching on people because that's not necessarily right either. It's not their fault that the system system is broken, because a lot of us in their situation would probably take advantage of it too. But to try and pretend as though this is a villainous talking point when it's something that actually does happen with people on welfare or Section 8 seems really off-putting to me.
Or your teacher who tries to indoctrinate.
So in this next line of him saying your teacher is trying to indoctrinate you seems very weird as well. What if the teacher is trying to indoctrinate the kids to become Christian, or indoctrinate them by saying one particular group of people is more superior than the other, and all other people who aren't straight, who are adults, and they love other adults, and it's consensual if they're not straight, or if they're not gay, they should be put down. Shouldn't that be reported?
A socialist who says the stars and stripes aren't great.
And the socialist line is just stupid. If someone believes that a socialist system would work better, that's their right to believe that. If they believe that a communist life is better, that's their right to believe that. I mean, it's kind of stupid for people to choose to live in a country that doesn't have those ideals instead of moving to those that do, but it is still their right to believe it. Some people have those ideals because they see merit in them, and in their mind, they think that society would benefit better. When I was little and I didn't know much about communism, I used to think that it seemed like a very fair way to make sure that everyone was taken care of, because I used to want to heal the world. I still do. But now that I'm an adult and I've done more research on it and I've seen other countries implementing it, I realize that's basically what we have in our system, but much worse. And when I say worse, I mean worse for the ordinary people. It is my opinion that communal structures work best in smaller societies, tribes, or towns, like we saw in The Last of Us. But that's not the most egregious thing about this little Christmas segment in The Boys. At the very start of the episode, A-Train's puppet starts off with a groomer line.
When you see something, say something. Report that groomer when he comes for you.
Ryan seems to be into it until A-Train starts devolving into all this other weird stuff that requires you to snitch on people or your parents just for being ordinary and having opinions or being free to love who they love. As a standalone scene, you completely understand this, but this theme seems to run throughout the show, honestly making it seem as though only the super radical people care about kids being groomed. When people try to save kids from potential predators, it is shown in a light in the show that makes these people seem crazy. If that was not the showrunner's intent, it wasn't executed properly, and can be taken quite wrong. It can come across as suggesting that people who are right-leaning, moderate, or even far-right care about the safety of kids, but anyone who is liberal doesn't. Look, I consider myself a centrist, and when I took my political test, I was still considered left-leaning with most things. However, it was very troubling to me that in The Boys, they make it seem as though it's only a right-leaning person's concern when it comes to the safety of children in regards to predators. Why are none of the other characters concerned about this? Or why do they mock people who are, even if it's misguided? People from every side of the aisle prey on children all the time. You would think that this would be the one thing that everyone would unite on. And you can make the argument that the showrunner isn't doing this and does care about kids, but the implication and structuring of the show makes him kind of suspect. There are beats in the show, such as Starlight explaining why she terminated the pregnancy. I completely understand her reasoning. Furthermore, I don't think she'd make a very good parent anyway, with all the stuff that she's dealing with and the inability to control her anger. I do think that Huey would make a good father because he seems way more emotionally mature to handle a child than Starlight does. Starlight is so broken, and some of that stems from how her mother conditioned her to be mean, and I honestly fear that she would instill that in her child without even realizing it, so it's responsible of her to not have a child at the moment, especially when you consider her reasoning is because she thinks that the world is heading in a bad direction with all these superpowered beings and Homelander trying to achieve what he is.
I didn't want to bring a baby into a world that's ending.
But yeah, I think the show's attempt to point fingers and mock right-leaning people for caring about kids being groomed, even if it's a very radical conspiracy theory attitude, might not be the right approach when you consider that most people will take it to mean that left-leaning people don't care about this. Like I said, that's probably not the case, and this was a very heartwarming scene for Ryan, but that's how it can easily be construed. So when we get lines like,
report on their own parents.
Lyrics were approved by your dad personally. So, lyrics were approved by your dad personally.
people who feel that Homelander is a villain will automatically think that everything that comes out of his mouth and everything he approves of is bad, including reporting predators. Please, for the love of God, teach your children that if someone is doing something to them, they need to come to you. I was not awarded that liberty, and I kept my mouth shut about a lot of things that happened to me as a kid. Now I'm very open about it, and I have no problem speaking about it and constantly bringing it up because I know I'm not the only one. There are many other boys and girls out there who were taken advantage of, especially by close family members. I would have personally taken it to my grave if my ex-boyfriend had not gone off the deep end after I shared this with him in confidence when I thought we were bonding because he too was taken advantage of when he was little. But he called my mother at work to tell her that I had something to say to her, forcing me into a situation where I had to unveil everything to my mom. This led to her making me confront my uncle, who was one of the people that did it to me, and it was extremely uncomfortable for me, especially hearing him yell at both of us, something he had never ever done, because he was always such a sweet and loving and fun person, and hearing him deny to my face and lie through his teeth that he would never do something like that and that he didn't know what I was talking about. The worst part about all of this is he was my favorite uncle. He was my favorite person in the whole world, and even though my mother tried to tell me that what I did was right by confronting him and telling her everything, I still, to this day, feel as though I betrayed him and ruined her and the rest of her brother's relationship with him. I still feel that guilt, even though I know it's not my fault. I was a child and I was groomed, and to me, that was worse than those other adult strangers who just did what they did to me and left. But please do not feel bad for me. It made me a tougher person. I'm not looking for sympathy, but rather to make people aware and using what happened to me as a means to try and protect other people from it happening to them, or making parents aware of the dangers and what to look for and how children think and experience those things. I've forgiven those people, including my uncle, and weirdly enough, I still love him, even though that might sound messed up, but he got deported anyway. But in saying all of this, children who watch this, and I know it's crazy, but there are minors who watch The Boys, might associate Homelander approving of these lyrics as something bad, which could equate them to not reporting groomers.
That's weird.
Which honestly only serves to make the showrunner look very sketchy. Yes, it's probable that I might be looking at it from that lens because it had personally affected me, but because it happened to me, I can pick up on things very easily that seem strange, even when they're hidden in subtle messages like TV shows. And it shouldn't be such a big deal anyway, because the showrunner himself is leading this production from his personal angle and from his personal views and biases as well. I'm not saying that the showrunner or the writers are groomers.
That's not what I said.
So I don't want people jumping to that conclusion. However, I'm just saying that it does look very inappropriate and in some respects can make them appear that way. And it seems to imply through the writing that everybody on Homelander's side that has a problem with adults grooming kids is somehow evil because that's one of their talking points. Can you also see how if people have been victims of something like this, especially kids, how they might lean towards the villains and come out siding with people like Homelander? Because surely if Homelander does not like groomers and is fighting to protect kids, like the victimized kid who might be watching, well then it must mean everything else he says could have some truth to it, right? Even those things that are crazy. People might think the show is left-leaning and the showrunner basically admits that, but it would be so hilarious if in a weird twist, this was some form of subliminal messaging that is actually pushing far-right radical viewpoints by making the villains actually look as though they're justified and as though they're the more righteous people. Don't believe me? Most people who watch The Boys, their favorite character is Homelander or Firecracker or Butcher. The most interestingly written people with the most depth are the freaking villains or anti-heroes.
We have a problem.
I know there's this obsession now with modern day media and redeeming villains or making them look hot or alluring, but I feel like it's blurred the line between good and bad, even though in a show like The Boys, nobody is actually a black and white good or bad person. Sometimes sloppy writing makes it seem as though the people who follow Starlight, and Starlight herself, who was very self-righteous, very fitting since she comes from a cultish religious background, are good people who do very bad things. Meanwhile, people who follow Homelander are just very bad, stupid people who do bad, stupid things and are the most degenerate.
This kid is nasty, and I fucking like it. Yes.
People like Vicky or A-Train have redeemable qualities, and so did Deep until they decided to backtrack him for whatever reason, maybe one reason in particular, just out of the blue, making him seem one-dimensional. Ironically, it feels as though all the effort for character development and backstory has gone into Homelander, even more so than Butcher. We're getting a little bit with Ryan's story as well, but most people stay for Homelander. Yeah, nothing is wrong with that, but I can understand how some people would see this as a little bit concerning, especially given Homelander's backstory and how he was taken advantage of as a child. Oh my god, look how hot Starlight was. But anyway, this further adds to the irony of this whole thing. I still find enjoyment in The Boys, but not as much as when it just started. And I'm still hoping that Frankie and Kimiko get together because they have the most chemistry out of everybody in this entire show. Starlight is only likable when it turns turns out that, spoilers, it was actually a freaking shapeshifter acting as her. I knew right away because Starlight is usually so uptight and looks like she only makes love to Huey once a year. The two have no chemistry whatsoever, and she looks and acts more like Huey's mother than his girlfriend. Just even them making out here is like, ugh, ugh. If you asked me off the street, not having seen the show, to watch these two people interact and guess what their relationship was, I would think that there were two people who just met each other on the subway and one asked the other one for the time, or they made small talk about the weather and then never saw each other again.
Oh my God, you need stitches.
We'll go to urgent care, okay?
I'll go with you.
No, go back up there, get those plans before whoever gets back, all right? I'll catch up with you later.
Okay, I love you.
Does that look like a couple to you? He's hurt and she's like, oh my God, I don't want to touch you. So I'm just going to be like, look, you're kind of hurt, but I'm not going to even touch you or take your hand like most girlfriends would, like she would in the beginning. And she's leaving and she says, I love you, doesn't kiss him or anything. I mean, yeah, maybe they're comfortable in their relationship, but they just give me the ick. I don't know. At this point, their relationship just feels so forced, stale, and fake. It was cute when it started, and now this is how it's going. All the chemistry just kind of washed away with her freaking face. Anyway, I don't want to take away anyone's enjoyment for the show if you genuinely enjoy it. I too still do enjoy segments of it, but I realize and I maintain that it's starting to kind of run its course in this 4th season. They're depending solely on shock value now while wasting a bit of time in the storytelling, which could have all been wrapped up in the last season in my opinion. I swear if the show gets few more seasons after this, it's going to be painfully obvious that they're just stretching it out and milking it for all it's worth. It's just really starting to feel that way.
When you see something, say something. A 1-800-1 thought.